Commander is stood before the great memorial, his four arms crossed over his chest in the traditional salute of his people. Around him, thousands of others did the same, each in their own way. Some had tentacles that they pressed to their foreheads. Others had wings that they folded tight against their bodies. A few had no limbs at all and simply bowed their massive heads toward the ground. The memorial stretched across the gray soil of the small moon they called Remembrance. It was 3 kilometers long and made of a strange dark material that seemed to swallow light. Along its surface were carved 15 billion names. 15 billion humans who had died 50 years ago today. Is had been younger then, but he remembered every moment of that day. He remembered it in his dreams. He remembered it when he closed his eyes. He would remember it until the day he died, and even then, he hoped his soul would remember it too. Around him, the others were crying. They who floated in the air with their large brains exposed, wept tears that glowed blue and fell slowly to the ground. They whose bodies were covered in hard shells like beetles made a clicking sound that was their version of sobbing. Even the who were made of living stone shed small pebbles from their eyes that clattered on the memorial's surface. Is felt his own tears coming. He did not try to stop them. On this day, tears were not a sign of weakness. They were a sign of remembering. They were a sign of respect. 50 years, said a voice beside him. Is turned to see Scholar Cal floating at his shoulder. This brain pulsed with a soft purple light, which meant he was deep in thought. 50 years, and still it feels like yesterday. Yes, Is agreed. His voice was rough. He had been a commander of the battle fleet during the war. He had seen many terrible things, but nothing compared to what he had witnessed 50 years ago. Do you think the younger ones understand? Cal asked. Those who were not there. Is looked around at the crowd. There were indeed young ones present, children of various species, brought by their parents to learn about the sacrifice. They looked confused by all the crying. They did not understand why their parents came to this moon every year to weep at a wall of names. No, Is said quietly. They cannot understand, not truly. You had to be there, you had to see what the humans did. Lieutenant approached them, walking slowly on her 6 legs. The shell was and cracked in places, wounds from the war that had never fully healed. She carried a small object in her mandibles, which she placed gently at the base of the memorial. It was a flower from her home world, red and gold. Every year I bring one, said. Every year I hope it is enough, but it never feels like enough. Nothing feels like enough, Cal agreed. How do you thank a species that no longer exists? That was the heart of it, Is thought. That was why they all came here every year, why they wept, why they could never forget. The humans had saved them all, and then the humans had died. It had started 30 years before the end when the Devourers first appeared. No one knew where they came from. Some said they were from another dimension. Others said they were created by some mad scientist in a lab. It did not matter. What mattered was that they were hungry and they ate everything. The Devourers looked like insects, but they were as large as starships. They moved in swarms of millions, sometimes billions. They would descend on a planet and consume it, breaking it apart and eating every atom. Then they would move to the next planet and the next and the next. The galaxy tried to fight them. Every species sent their best warriors, their strongest ships, their most powerful weapons. Nothing worked. The Devourers could not be reasoned with. They could not be frightened. They could only consume. For 20 years, the Devourers ate their way across the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds fell. Trillions died. The coalition of species that governed the galaxy grew desperate. They tried everything. Biological weapons that the Devourers simply absorbed. Explosives that destroyed planets but barely scratched the swarms. Even attempts to flee to other galaxies, though the Devourers followed. Then the humans made their proposal. Is would never forget the day he heard it. He had been in the Great War Chamber, a massive space station orbiting what was left of the home world. The chamber was filled with the leaders of every species in the coalition. Everyone was exhausted. Everyone had lost someone. Many had lost everything. Admiral Sarah had walked to the center of the chamber. She was small, even for a human. Her hair was gray and her face was lined with wrinkles, but her eyes were bright and clear. "We have found something," she said. Her voice was calm, as if she were discussing the weather instead of the end of the galaxy. "The Devourers are attracted to consciousness. Specifically, they are attracted to a quantum signature that conscious minds produce." Everyone knew this already. It was why the Devourers always went for populated planets first and ignored dead rocks floating in space. "Human consciousness produces this signature more strongly than any other known species," continued. "We do not know why. Perhaps our brains are structured differently. Perhaps it is something in our evolution. But the fact remains that to the Devourers, one human mind is as attractive as 10 minds or 20 minds." Iz had felt his blood run cold. He knew what was coming next. "If we gather all humans in one location," said, "we can create a beacon so bright that the Devourers will not be able to resist it. They will abandon their current feeding grounds and come to us. All of them." The chamber had erupted in noise, everyone shouting at once, some in horror, some in anger, some in disbelief. Had waited for silence, then she continued. "We have developed a weapon that can collapse a star into a black hole. If we lure the Devourers to our home system, to Earth's sun, we can activate the weapon when they arrive. The black hole will destroy them, all of them." "And all of you," Iz had said. He had not shouted. He had not needed to. His voice carried across the chamber. Had looked at him directly. "Yes," she said simply, "all of us." The debate that followed had lasted for days. Many species argued against it. The humans had only joined the galactic community 200 years ago. They were still new, still learning. They had so much potential. Their art, their music, their strange way of looking at the universe that no other species quite understood. And there were only 15 billion of them. In a galaxy of trillions, they were a small population. Surely they should not be the ones to sacrifice themselves. But had an answer for every argument. The Devourers were winning. Soon they would reach the galactic core, where most of the population centers were located. Billions would become trillions of dead. Then trillions would become quadrillions. "We can end this," had said. "We can save you all. We have run the numbers 1,000 times. This is the only way that works." In the end, the coalition had agreed, not because they wanted to, but because was right. Iz blinked and found himself back at the memorial, tears running down his face. Cal was still floating beside him, was still standing with her head bowed. "I remember when they started coming home," said softly. "All the human ships, all the human colonies, all heading back to Earth. I was stationed near the Andromeda Gate. I watched thousands of ships pass through, every single one carrying humans back to their deaths. I spoke to one of the ship captains," Cal said. "I asked her if she was afraid. She said yes, but she also said she was proud. She said that humanity would be remembered not for how long they lived, but for how they chose to die." Iz closed his eyes. He remembered the final days before the collapse. He remembered seeing Earth on the view screens, that small blue world, now crowded with every human who had ever lived. They had gathered on the surface, on the moon, on Mars, in orbital stations. 15 billion minds all burning bright. And the Devourers had come. Like moths to a flame, they had abandoned everything else and rushed toward Earth. The swarm had been so large that it blocked out the stars. For 3 days, the humans had held them off. 3 days of fighting, of dying, of making sure the Devourers were fully committed to the attack. The coalition fleet had surrounded the entire solar system, ready to seal it off the moment the weapon activated. On the 3rd day, had given the order. Iz opened his eyes and looked at the memorial, at the names carved into its dark surface, at the flowers and tokens left by others who remembered. "Tell them we were here," he whispered, repeating last words. Tell them we mattered. Tell them we loved this universe enough to die for it." Around him, the other veterans nodded. They would tell the story. They would keep telling it for as long as they lived, and when they died, their children would tell it, and their children's children. The humans had saved them all. The least they could do was remember. The weeks after the Coalition approved humanity's plan had been chaos. Every human ship, no matter where it was in the galaxy, received the same message. "Come home. Come back to Earth. It is time." Iz had watched it happen from his command deck. His fleet had been assigned to protect several human colony worlds in the Outer Rim while they evacuated. He had expected panic, confusion, maybe even resistance. Instead, he had seen something that shook him to his core. The humans had gone quietly. Oh, there had been tears. There had been goodbyes that lasted for hours. There had been children asking questions that their parents could barely answer. But there had been no rebellion. No one had tried to run. No one had tried to hide. They had simply packed their belongings, hugged their alien friends, and boarded the ships that would take them home to die. Is remembered one family in particular, a human woman named Maria, her husband James, and their 2 children. They had been living on Prime for 15 years. Maria had been a teacher at the academy where children learned. James had been an engineer who helped design better engines for their ships. When the evacuation order came, Maria's students had gathered at the spaceport to say goodbye. Hundreds of children, their 4 arms reaching out to touch her one last time. She had cried and hugged each one. She had told them to study hard and be kind and remember that the universe was full of wonders. Then she had walked onto the ship with her family and never looked back. "Why?" Iz had asked her before she left. "Why do you accept this so easily?" Maria had smiled at him, though her eyes were wet with tears. "Because someone has to," she said. "Because this is what heroes do. We like to think we're all heroes, we humans. Maybe we're not. Maybe we're just a species that got lucky enough to be useful. But if our deaths can save trillions of lives, then that's a pretty good way to die, don't you think?" Iz had not known what to say to that. In culture, death in battle was honorable. But death by choice, death by walking willingly into oblivion, that was something else entirely. That was something he had no words for. The evacuation had taken 6 weeks. 6 weeks of ships arriving at Earth in an endless stream. 6 weeks of humanity gathering together for the last time. The Coalition had provided supplies, food, water, medicine. They had made sure every human made it home safely. It had felt obscene, Iz thought, making sure they arrived safely, knowing they were all going to die. Scholar Cal had been assigned to document everything. They were the record keepers of the galaxy, and they took their job seriously. Cal had interviewed hundreds of humans during those 6 weeks. He had asked them why they were doing this, how they felt, what they wanted the galaxy to remember. Most of them said the same thing, Cal had told us later. They said they were scared. They said they wished there was another way, but they also said they were glad it was them and not someone else. They said that at least this way, their children would not have to watch the devourers eat the galaxy. But they do not have children, Iz had pointed out. They are all going to die. There will be no human children after this. "I know," Cal had said quietly. "I think they meant our children, the children of all of us." That had been the moment Iz truly understood. The humans were not dying for their own species. They were dying for everyone, for people they had never met, for species they barely knew, for a future they would never see. When all 15 billion humans were finally gathered in the Sol system, they had done something unexpected. They had started broadcasting. Every human everywhere in the system had connected to the same network. They had begun sharing everything that made them human. Music poured out across the stars, and Beatles and 1,000 other names Iz could not pronounce. Art filled the data streams, paintings and sculptures and digital creations. Literature flooded the channels, poetry and stories and plays. And messages, so many messages. Humans recorded videos of themselves talking to the future. They told jokes. They shared recipes. They explained their customs and their beliefs. They argued about sports and politics and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They sang and danced and laughed and cried. "We want you to know who we were," one message said. It was from a young man who could not have been more than 20 years old. "We want you to remember that we were real. We had dreams and fears and stupid arguments about things that didn't matter. We were flawed and broken and beautiful. And we loved this universe. We loved it so much." The broadcasts had been designed to attract the devourers, to make the human quantum signature even brighter and more irresistible. But they had become something more than that. They had become humanity's last testament, their final gift to the galaxy. Is had listened to those broadcasts for hours. He had not understood all of it. Human culture was strange and contradictory, but he had felt something in those voices, something that transcended species and language. He had felt their humanity. The devourers had noticed too. The swarm had been scattered across a dozen sectors, consuming planets and moving ever closer to the galactic core. But when the human beacon lit up, bright and irresistible, the devourers had turned as one. Is had watched on the sensors as billions of creatures changed course. They had abandoned half-eaten worlds. They had ignored fleeing ships. They had focused entirely on the Sol system and the 15 billion humans waiting there. "They are coming," Admiral had said in her final broadcast to the Coalition fleet. "All of them, just as we planned. Hold the perimeter. Do not let any escape." The Coalition fleet had been the largest armada ever assembled. Every species had contributed ships. Tens of thousands of vessels formed a sphere around the Sol system, ready to seal it off the moment the weapon activated. His flagship had been positioned at the northern perimeter. From there, he had watched the devourers arrive. They had come in waves, millions, then billions, then tens of billions. The swarm was so massive that it blocked out the light from distant stars. They had descended on the Sol system like a living shadow, mandibles clicking, always hungry. The humans had fought back. Their ships, their orbital defenses, their ground-based weapons, everything they had left. They had fought not to win, but to delay, to make sure the devourers committed fully to the attack, to make sure none of them escaped what was coming. For 3 days, humanity held the line. 3 days of desperate combat. 3 days of watching ships explode and stations fall and brave people die. Is had wanted to help. His entire fleet had wanted to help, but orders were orders. They had to hold the perimeter. They had to let the humans die alone. On the 3rd day, when the devourers had fully surrounded Earth and were beginning their final approach, Admiral had appeared on the screens one last time. She looked tired. Her uniform was torn and burned. There was blood on her face, but she was smiling. "This is Admiral Sarah of the human species," she said. "In approximately 60 seconds, we will activate the stellar collapse device. The Sol system will be destroyed. The devourers will be destroyed. And humanity will be destroyed. We do this willingly. We do this gladly. We do this because we believe that life is worth protecting, even if that life is not our own." She paused and looked directly at the camera, directly at all of them watching. "Tell them we were here," she said. "Tell them we mattered. Tell them we loved this universe enough to die for it. And please, please remember us." Then the screen had gone black. 60 seconds later, the Sol system star had collapsed. Is had seen stars die before. He had seen supernovas and black holes and all manner of cosmic destruction, but nothing compared to this. The star had imploded with such force that it created a gravitational anomaly visible across half the galaxy. Then it had exploded outward in a wave of radiation and matter. Then it had collapsed again, forming a black hole that swallowed everything within 100 astronomical units. The devourers had not had time to react. They had been pulled into the black hole by the billions, their bodies torn apart by forces beyond comprehension. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for 30 years had been destroyed in less than a minute. And with them, humanity had been destroyed too. The coalition fleet had held position for 3 days after, making sure no devourers had escaped, but the sensors showed nothing. The swarm was gone. The threat was over. Humanity had saved them all, and humanity had paid the price. Stood in the shadows at the edge of the memorial, watching the aliens weep. He had come here in secret, wearing a hood to hide his face. He did not want anyone to know he was human. He did not want to answer the questions that would come. Because was not supposed to exist. He was the great-great-grandson of Admiral Sarah. His family line had survived because of an accident of timing. His great-great-grandfather had been serving on a coalition ship when the evacuation order came. The ship had been delayed by a devourer attack, and by the time they made it back to the Sol system, the star had already collapsed. 3 human ships had been delayed that day. Out of thousands of ships, only 3 had not made it home in time. 4,000 humans had survived. 4,000 out of 15 billion. For 50 years, those survivors and their descendants had lived in secret. The coalition knew about them, of course. The coalition protected them, but they had not announced their existence to the galaxy. They had honored humanity's sacrifice by not diminishing it with the revelation that some had survived. Had grown up knowing he was different. He had grown up on a small station in the Outer Rim, raised by his grandmother who had been just a child when Earth died. She had told him stories about humanity, about what they had been like, about the sacrifice that saved the galaxy. "We are ghosts," she had told him. "We are the echoes of a dead species. We must decide what that means." Now was 25 years old, and he had come to the memorial for the first time. He had wanted to see it. He had wanted to understand what the galaxy thought of his people. What he saw was aliens crying. Thousands of them from dozens of species, all mourning a race they had barely known. They left flowers and tokens at the base of the memorial. They touched the names carved in the dark stone. They told stories to their children about the brave humans who had died. It should have made him feel proud. Instead, it made him feel hollow. A voice spoke beside him. "You are human." Turned, startled. An alien stood there, tall and four-armed, with blue skin and silver eyes. Recognized. This one was old, his skin lined with age, his movements slow and careful. "I am Commander Is," the alien said. "I fought in the war, I watched your people die." He paused, then added gently, "You are not hiding as well as you think." Pulled back his hood. There was no point in hiding now. "How did you know?" "I have been coming here for 50 years, Is said. I have learned to spot humans in a crowd even when they try to hide. You move differently than we do. You hold yourselves differently." He gestured to the memorial. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to see it," said. "I wanted to understand what they died for." "Do you understand now?" Looked at the crying aliens. At the memorial with 15 billion names. At the tokens and flowers and grief that would not fade even after 50 years. "No," he said honestly. "I do not understand why they did it. I do not understand how they walked so calmly to their deaths. I do not understand what made them think 15 billion lives were worth less than trillions of others." Is was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "They did not think their lives were worth less. They thought all lives were worth the same. And when the only solution required sacrifice, they chose to be the ones to pay the price." "But they barely knew you," said. His voice cracked. "They had only been in space for 200 years. They barely understood the galaxy. Why would they die for strangers?" "Because they were human," Is said simply. "That is what humans do." Felt tears running down his face. He had not cried in years. He had told himself he would not cry, that he had no right to cry when he was alive and they were all dead. But standing here at this memorial, surrounded by aliens who mourned his species more than he knew how to, the tears came anyway. "There are others like you," Is said. "We know about the survivors. About 20,000 of you now, scattered across the galaxy. We have protected you, kept you secret. We thought it was what humanity would have wanted. What do we do now? Asked. Are we supposed to repopulate, bring humanity back from extinction, or are we supposed to stay hidden forever, ghosts of a dead species? That is for you to decide, is said. We will support whatever choice you make, but I will tell you what I think. He gestured to the memorial. Your great-great-grandmother and all the others did not die to end humanity. They died to save the galaxy. If humanity returns, if you build a new generation, that does not diminish their sacrifice. It honors it. Looked at the memorial. At the name Sarah carved among billions of others. He had never met her. She had died 150 years before he was born. But he carried her DNA, her legacy, her choice. What did we teach you? Asked. All of you who survived, who built this memorial, who cry every year. What did humanity teach the galaxy? Is smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien features. You taught us that the measure of a species is not their age or their power or their technology. It is their capacity to care for others. You taught us that sacrifice is not weakness but the greatest strength. You taught us that even a small species, even a new species, can change the universe forever. He placed one of his 4 hands on shoulder. You taught us that in a galaxy of trillions, every single life matters, every single choice matters, and sometimes the right choice is the hardest one. More veterans were approaching now. They had noticed his human features, but they did not look angry or surprised. They looked hopeful. Scholar Cal floated forward, his brain pulsing with soft light. A human, he said quietly. A living human. I had hoped, but I did not dare believe. Lieutenant clicked forward on her 6 legs. The coalition has waited for you to be ready, to decide what you want. Do you wish to remain hidden? Do you wish to be revealed? The choice is yours. Looked at them all. These aliens who had fought beside his ancestors, who had watched humanity die, who had mourned for 50 years and built a memorial 3 kilometers long. I do not know, he said honestly. I need time. We all need time. There are 20,000 of us scattered across the galaxy. We need to find each other, talk to each other, decide together. We can help with that, is said. We have been searching for human survivors for 50 years. We know where most of you are. We can bring you together if you wish. Nodded slowly. Yes, I think we need that. I think we need to decide together what it means to be the survivors of a species that sacrificed itself. Then we will make it happen, Cal said. We owe humanity that much. We owe humanity everything. They stood together at the memorial as the sun set on remembrance. Around them, aliens continued to weep and leave offerings. The ceremony would continue for hours more, as it did every year. Thought about his grandmother, who had lived her whole life in secret. He thought about his great-great-grandfather, who had survived by accident and spent the rest of his life wondering if he should have died with the others. He thought about all the survivors who carried the weight of being alive when everyone else was dead. And he thought about Admiral Sarah, who had looked at the galaxy and decided it was worth saving, even at the cost of everything humanity had ever been. Tell them we were here, whispered, repeating her last words. Tell them we mattered. We do, is said. Every year we come here and tell the story. We tell our children and our children's children. We have made sure the galaxy will never forget. But will they understand? Asked. Will they understand what it cost? Will they understand why it mattered? Some will, is said. Some already do. Others will learn. That is why we keep telling the story. That is why we keep coming back. Looked at the memorial one more time. 15 billion names carved in stone. 15 billion people who had chosen to die so that others could live. His ancestors, his people, his responsibility. I want to help tell the story, he said suddenly. I want to talk to these veterans, learn what they remember. I want to understand what my people did, what they meant to the galaxy. And then I want to help decide what humanity should be next. "You are always welcome here," Cal said. "We will share everything we know. We will help you understand." "There is something else you should know," is said. "The memorial is not just a monument to the dead. It is also a promise. After humanity's sacrifice, every species in the coalition swore an oath. Never again will any race stand alone. Never again will sacrifice be necessary. We will face threats together, share burdens together. What humanity did will never need to be done again." Felt something shift inside him. The hollow feeling that had plagued him since he arrived began to fill with something else. Not happiness exactly, not even hope, but purpose. "That is a good legacy," he said. "It is the best legacy," agreed. "Humanity changed the galaxy in 200 years. Most species need millions of years to make such an impact. Your people compressed it into a brief, brilliant moment." "Like a star-going supernova," Cal added. "Brief but unforgettable, lighting up the darkness for everyone to see." They stayed at the memorial until the last veteran had left, until the last offering had been placed. Touched the stone where his great-great-grandmother's name was carved. The surface was cold beneath his fingers. "I am here," he whispered to her. "Your blood survived. Your line continued. I do not know if that was what you wanted, but it is what happened. And I promise I will try to be worthy of what you did." The stone offered no answer, but had not expected one. As they walked away from the memorial, is said, "There is a gathering in 3 months. All the senior veterans come together to share memories and ensure the history is preserved correctly. You should come. Bring other survivors if you can find them. It is time for the galaxy to know that humanity's story is not over." "It might never be over," said. "Even if we never rebuild, even if the 20,000 of us are all that ever exist, we will remember. And we will make sure our children remember. That is all any of us can do," is said. "Remember, honor, and try to live in a way that makes the sacrifice worth it." They reached the transport station where ship was waiting. Before he boarded, he turned back one more time to look at the memorial. In the growing darkness, the stone seemed to glow with a faint light, as if the names themselves were luminous. 15 billion people had died there. 15 billion people had chosen death so that others could live. It was the greatest act of courage could imagine, and it terrified him because he did not know if he could ever live up to it. But he would try. He would find the other survivors. He would learn the full story of what humanity had done, and he would help decide what humanity would become next. Because Admiral Sarah had been right. It did not matter how long a species lived. It mattered what they did with the time they had. Humanity had been in the galaxy for only 200 years, but they had saved it. That was enough. That would always be enough. Boarded his ship and set course for the nearest survivor colony. There was work to do. There were people to find. There were stories to learn and decisions to make. Behind him, on the moon called Remembrance, the memorial stood silent and eternal. The names of 15 billion humans carved into stone, a testament to sacrifice, a promise to the future, a reminder that even in a universe of trillions, one species could change everything. The extraterrestrial veterans would return next year, as they always did. They would weep, as they always did. They would remember, as they always would. And now, for the first time in 50 years, they would weep not just for the dead, but also for the living, for the 20,000 humans who carried humanity's legacy forward, for the hope that maybe, just maybe, the story was not over after all. The universe was full of wonders, Admiral had once said, and humanity, brief and brilliant, had been one of them.